All right, CJ Stroud, as expected, has declared for the NFL draft. Let the debates heat up. CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis. Who do you want? Who do you want the Texans to select? There's a lot of angles to get into here, and it all just kind of depends as the most exciting, important offseason in Texans history resumes. We got some coaching news I'll get into later on tonight. It is The Locker Room on YouTube. I'm Landry Locker from Sports Radio 610. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 610 in the Odyssey app. Also, see me here daily talking Texans, one of the only daily sources for digital Texans content. We're the flagship station. We have Players Weekly. Cal and Hannah McNair just joined the show. We're at training camp every single practice, Players Weekly, and as close as you can possibly be to the team, and I try to bring that to you in the digital form. So subscribe, spread the word. Even if you're not a Texans fan, subscribe because there aren't many people doing this. And shout out to all the people putting out Texans content. Consume as much as you can, but hopefully you subscribe to The Locker Room and make that part of your Texans viewing. It's going to be an interesting offseason. Obviously, we're on coaches, but a lot of people focused on the quarterback, and CJ Stroud, another name to the list of quarterbacks that the Texans could potentially be after. And he never left the list. Like, you knew CJ Stroud was going to declare. Now he's declared, and there's a lot of questions that come up. Me personally, I'm a Bryce Young guy. I'm a Bryce or bust. With the second pick, I'm not in on CJ Stroud. I'm not in on Will Levis. I know there are some Will Levis guys. Bless your hearts. But I am a Bryce Young guy. I think he has the makeup. I think he has all of the qualities that you need to combat his size and the stuff that we're going to be talking about. I'm a Bryce Young at the top guy. I'm not a CJ Stroud guy. It's not because I don't think he can end up being a good pro. I'm just not as much of a CJ Stroud guy. Just not. It's not one of those like, oh, no quarterback from Ohio State, blah, blah, blah. No. Seems like a very good young man. I just think as far as like stuff that translates to the next level, I think Bryce Young is above CJ Stroud. But not everyone feels that way. And we'll have plenty of time to cuss and discuss what CJ Stroud is or isn't the next few months as the draft approaches. There are a couple of things I want to get into, though, from a Texans POV, because we like to localize it. Do the Texans like CJ Stroud? What are the Texans going to think about CJ Stroud? Let's first hear from General Manager Nick Caserio. This was on Sports Radio 610. This is Nick Caserio talking about what he personally looks for in a quarterback.
Whomever we have as an offensive staff, what are the things that I prioritize? How I view the quarterback position is decision-making, the ability to play under duress, accuracy, timing, and anticipation. So those are things, when you look at that position, are important. And I think one of the things that we've seen over the last, call it 2 to 3 years, when you look at trends in the league, the quarterbacks are more athletic, they're more mobile, they're able to do more, I would say, outside of the pocket, even within the pocket, the whole RPO element. It's not as if you have most quarterbacks, it's designed runs, I would say, other than maybe Hurts, who's a big part of the running game in Philly, and they've essentially built the offense around Jalen to accentuate the things that he does well. So, but when you get right back down to it for the quarterback, how do they execute the most critical situations, which are third down, red area, 2-minute? Ultimately, you're going to have to be able to throw the ball effectively in those situations with accuracy, make good decisions, and be able to anticipate what the other team is going to do on the other side of the ball. So I would say those are, 5 or 6 elements that we mentioned. So then you can get into, I would say, size, strength, speed, arm strength, all those other types of things. But there's so many things that go into playing quarterback.
So there's going to be a lot of those boxes that CJ Stroud does check off. Unlike Jalen Hurts, like neither Stroud or Young, they're not really dual threat guys. They can make plays with their legs and they can look to extend plays, and they often do, but they're not really going to take off. And I know there's a lot of people, not all of you, that really don't watch a lot of college football, and you tune in during the playoffs. So if you watch CJ Stroud against Georgia, you look at some of the runs that he was making and you say, man, this guy's he's really good as a dual threat guy. a lot of the time he was not really willing to run like he was in that Georgia game. I think he finished the year with over 100 yards rushing. A large chunk of that came in that game. So maybe that's something that he's going to do more at the NFL level, but he's not really someone, they're not Jalen Hurts like. But the coach, it is going to depend. And I think, we can speculate about what Caserio may or may not like, but it's going to have to do as much with the coach as anything. And who knows how much the Texans like him. I think they're probably going to like him. Will they like him more than Bryce Young? I think they're going to lean more Bryce Young, but your guess is as good as mine because we're still learning about Nick Caserio, and we've never seen him in this position where, he could potentially have his franchise quarterback at the top of the draft. Now, just as important is, does he like them? Does Bryce Young like the Houston Texans? There's been some speculation, and we've been talking about it for a while because the same Watson representation, the Watson camp, they work with CJ Stroud. Everyone from Brian Burney on the business side to David Mulligetta, the agent, they work with CJ Stroud. And we know about the sins of the past with the Houston Texans that led to Deshaun Watson first wanting out of town and then, the 2-year standoff. I actually think the Houston Texans did a pretty good job with the way they handled the Deshaun situation. They allowed him to pick his destination. And I don't think there's as much bad blood between the organization and the camp as many are led to believe. And that's not just a shot in the dark. I have it on pretty good authority. It's not as bad. Now, what does that mean? When push comes to shove, could CJ Stroud decide that he wants nothing to do with the Houston Texans? He absolutely could. But I do want to make something very, very clear. That's going to be his decision. And if you are going to discuss, what Bryce Young or what CJ Stroud is going to do, we got to make it very clear that it's going to be his decision, and the camp isn't going to tell him what to or not to do and what decision to make. If you don't believe me, here's the man in his own words, and this is courtesy of the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark, Fred Taylor, and Channing Crowder. This is CJ Stroud talking about his relationship with the Watson camp and how even at times when he could have made more money, he decided to kind of take his foot off the brakes. And here's him on what their reaction was to that.
And with Brian and David, they help us out as men more than just this marketing and stuff like that. Because all that stuff is cool. But if you talk to them, they know me, I'm a man of God first and foremost. And if I don't trust you without money, I'm not gonna trust you with it.
Right.
So they open me with welcome arms. And then they smart. That's something they teaching us financial literacy. They're not just giving us these deals. They're giving us deals with equity and not just showing us the money, but just showing us how we get into it and how to pay our bills and things like that. You know what I mean? So it's definitely kudos to them. And like I said, man, I think the main thing for me is just focusing on ball though. If it ain't about ball, I really can care less. And I had to slow it down. I asked Brian Burney, our marketing guy, during the season, I just felt like it was getting a little too hectic. So I was like, hey, can we please slow it down? You know what I'm saying? I just got to focus on ball. I know if you play good, you're going to get some money. You know what I mean? So, but if you don't, you focus on other things, you can get distracted. You're going to be thinking about too much. I just feel like that wasn't my case. And by the glory of God, they were supportive of that. And then we got it rolling.
All right. And then they got it rolling. So there you go. It's going to be his decision. Now they're going to advise him, and they might have some opinions on the Texans, but the Texans today aren't the Texans of the past with Deshaun Watson. Can I guarantee that things are heading in the right direction? I can't. But I would just be cautious when it matters. It's not irrelevant. The relationship with Watson's camp and the representation of CJ Stroud, but just be cautious when you're kind of just throwing out there that maybe he thinks stuff that, maybe he doesn't think. And because we don't know what he's going to decide. And he just told you himself in his own words that, it's his call and he gets to decide things. I'm sure they would like to make money, but they were very understanding there. So let's not jump to any conclusions until we hear more information and gather more information. So you've heard from him on his perspective. Let's hear from Nick Caserio talking about his relationship with the camp. Here's Nick Caserio on Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610. You can hear them 6 to 10 Monday through Friday on 610 and on the Odyssey app Here is Nick Caserio in the locker room on YouTube.
I would just say philosophically, my belief has always been to just try to maintain a consistent relationship with agents and representatives, understanding there's going to be players each year, and you really don't allow one situation to affect future decisions. I mean, it's not really a good way to do business. So I have a lot of respect for David. David's got a lot of good players. He's had a lot of good players for a number of years now. So you have to evaluate the player. Are you comfortable with the player when the player comes in the building? So, and at some point you're going to have a dialogue with the representatives. So my philosophy has always been never let one situation impact future situations. I think that's just the right way to do business. So certainly not going to dissuade us from, looking at a player. Honestly, it's not fair to that player. I've had dialogue with David. We had dialogue last year in free agency about some different players. He's had multiple players. He had, we talked, I asked him about a corner. There's various players that we were actually talking about during the Deshaun, say, trade negotiations. So conversation is always fluid. So I have a lot of respect for David and the job that he does, and he has really good players. So our responsibility is to look at everything and not let an individual dissuade you from making a decision. So I've never approached business that way. I'm not going to approach business that way. People that know me know that's how I operate. So try to be consistent in that respect.
All right, so there we go. That's Nick Caserio in his own words on that. So it's about perspective, especially this time of the season during this offseason. Who do the fans want? Not that that's going to be matter, but there's going to be some people who are CJ Stroud guys. There are going to be some people who are Bryce Young guys. There are going to be some people who are Will Levis guys. Bless your hearts. There's going to be other guys who are Anthony Richards guys. Bless your hearts. Not as much as Will Levis guys, but okay. And it's going to be fun to debate, or as my coworker Clint Sterner says, to cuss and discuss. Then it's going to be about the Texans' perspective. What do they think of CJ Stroud? And then the perspective from CJ Stroud, what does he think, and what would the camp say? Just try to be open-minded on it. Don't vilify the young man before. And if he decides he doesn't want to, be a member of the Texans, we'll see. But it was never in doubt that he was going to, declare for the draft. And now things get even more interesting. And the process continues. The offseason continues. A little later on, I'll put out a video on, and we'll go live tonight on D'Amico Ryans versus Mike Kafka. I'm starting to like Mike Kafka a lot. More than D'Amico Ryans? Probably not. But there are some interesting things, and there's definitely different personalities between the two guys. They're not alike at all. So we'll get into that. We'll continue to talk about the CJ Stroud, Bryce Young thing later on in the week. Nick Caserio, could Bryce Young's size actually be something that Nick Caserio gravitates to? We'll get into that. And again, it is the locker room. Subscribe, spread, like, all that type of stuff, all those checks that people go through when they do that. I would very much appreciate it. The channel's growing at a very good rate. We're getting all kinds of interviews on the radio with ownership, with players. We're going to be at training camp. We're going to be at the draft. I'm going to be right here with you. And we're going to have a lot of fun stuff going on. One of the only places that you can get daily digital Texans content. And shout out to everyone else doing their thing and putting that out. There's not enough Texans content on the internet. I've been living and dying this for a long, long time, and it's good to have a digital presence, and it's actually really fun to see the digital presence increase. Shout out to Cody Stoots. Shout out to 713 Sports. Shout out to everyone doing their thing. Spread the love. There's a lot to get into, but always subscribe to the locker room. And no matter what happens, whether it's CJ Stroud, whether it's Bryce Young, whether it's a defensive player, whether they hire Kafka, whether they hire D'Amico Ryans, whether they hire Sean F. and Payton, just remember, we're all in this together. Have a good one.